Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're really excited to have you here today and to this really fascinating session, which I've been really very much looking forward to. So welcome to the MIT Migration Summit. Ooh, sorry. Sorry, I've got too many things open. The MIT Migration Summit, organized by the MIT Refugee Action Hub, NAML, Karam Foundation, Paper Airplanes, and the MIT Abdul Latif Jameel World Education Lab, is a month-long global convening designed to build bridges between diverse communities of displaced learners, universities, companies, nonprofits, social enterprises, foundations, philanthropists, researchers, policymakers, around key issues and opportunities for refugee and migrant communities. This year, we're exploring the theme of education, workforce development, and displacement through virtual events hosted by participating partners around the world. Today, I welcome my friend, my wonderful friend, Nadia. Very excited to have you here today. Nadia has 7 years experience working in the sector of higher education for refugees with Jesuit Refugee Services, Jesuit Worldwide Learning, and the Global Education Movement. Nadia has focused her time on finding opportunities for refugee learners to engage in dignified work by building scaffolded internship opportunities, advocating for localized refugee work permits, and creating workplace stimulations to teach professional skills needed to succeed. In this session, we're going to look at these questions with employers willing to and qualified refugee pools. Positions should be filled with ease, but this is not the case. How can we address this? So we'll have a hackathon style session. We'll examine case studies of qualified refugee job seekers and identify barriers to entry into the workforce and design a program to help minimize or reduce these barriers. Nadia, welcome. I'm very happy to have you here.
Thanks so much, Lorraine, and thanks to the whole MIT team that has thrown all of these incredible sessions over the last couple of weeks. What a great group of people we have from all over the world. Also, my father has joined. So Zoom is an amazing thing because it allows all kinds of folks to join. Hi, Dad. I wasn't nervous until I saw your name, but now I have to say I'm a little nervous. I'm going to share my screen, and I hope that my tech skills will serve me well, but I anticipate a couple problems, so bear with me. And as Lorraine mentioned, we are going to be doing a participatory hackathon today, talking about some of the barriers and opportunities to hiring refugees. And before we jump in, let me introduce myself as your facilitator. So as Lorraine mentioned, my name is Nadia Asmal, and I've been working in this sector for the last 7 years, mostly in Dzaleka camp in Malawi, but also in several other countries across Southern Africa and the Middle East. And I've worked with Jesuit Worldwide Learning, Jesuit Refugee Service, and most recently, the Global Education Movement. And in all 3 of these organizations, have worked to help offer higher education opportunities in host countries, so non-resettlement countries. And my work has really focused on looking at employment as the finish line and not just the degree, because in as much as I love education for education's sake, it is less fun when you can't meet your basic needs. And in the majority of the countries that I've worked in and spent time in, refugees either do not have the right to work locally at all, or they have very restricted rights to work in certain sectors. So because of that, I've really shifted my focus and my work on pursuing opportunities for our beneficiaries in online work. And especially with the onset of the pandemic, I've seen a lot of articles published recently about how digital work is the solution to refugee livelihoods problems. And the articles are kind of like bam, here's a platform that connects employers with job seekers and problem solved. And I've been a bit frustrated by that rhetoric because I think a lot of us on the call that have either worked in this sector or have lived experiences as someone with refugee status applying for jobs, we understand that it is not that simple. So in today's session, we are going to take a look at the common barriers that refugees may face when accessing digital employment, and then work together to create possible solutions. And I'm really excited that this is a participatory session and I get to put on my teacher hat for the next hour. So I'm sorry this seems a little silly, but we are going to start with a warm up. In the chat box, I'm going to have you please put your name, your location, and then also answer this question. What was your very first money-making job? And it can be anything tiny. It can be your first internship. It can be selling lemonade outside when you were 7 years old. But just throw it in the chat box because we are talking about employment today. And I want to get to know each of you a little bit as we'll be engaging and interacting for the next hour. I'm going to play music for 1 minute and 30 seconds and yeah, have fun looking at people's responses.
She's got the good vibes, beauty that I can't describe, golden like the summer skies. Her shape, her skin don't crack, brown sugar, she a chocolate snack. Fire girl, she don't take no flag. You take the sun with you when you leave the room. It's incredible, I put you on the pedestal. I mean, oh, you're magical. You are special, you changed my life, it's a miracle. I'm in love, you already know. Cause you're my antidote. You're my antidote. Cause you're my antidote. You're my antidote. Cause I'm in love, you already know.
Baby, I love to have you. Take me from myself, you save me. You bring me life, you bring me joy. Lately, I've just been letting past life come and regressing. Take me.
Okay, amazing. These are such good responses. And I think a lot of us actually know each other on the call. So you know how awesome the journeys are. Barbershop Remy turned into computer programming guru. We have Christina's Red Lobster host turned into director of a huge refugee higher ed program. My very first job was my mom paid my sister and I to crush snails in the garden and made some pennies and then ran with our pennies to the ice cream shop. So yeah, we all started somewhere. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. And I am going to move us now to the part of this session that I'm most excited about, which is to hear from Joelle and Nurhan. And before we get into the hacking part of this hackathon, I wanted to give everyone a little dose of inspiration because this is not necessarily mission impossible. And there are many refugees who have navigated the challenges of gaining employment and been very successful in accessing meaningful jobs. And Joelle and Nurhan are two great examples of that. I had the privilege of working with both of them in their employment journeys and am excited for them to share their stories because in as much as they are success stories, what you'll hear in a minute is that they faced a lot of challenges and barriers in gaining that work and even keeping that work once they gained it. So Joelle will tell us a little bit about her experience gaining the much sought after, very rarely provided Class M work permit for refugees in Kenya to work legally. And then Nurhan will talk about her journey gaining a digital job. And I will actually unshare my screen so that you can see them as they speak. Joelle, I invite you to share your story.
Thank you so much, Nadia, and thanks everyone for having me here. And I feel really privileged to be part of this conversation. As Nadia just mentioned, I'm Joelle Hangi, originally from DRC Congo. and I've been in Kenya for more than 8 years now. And yeah, I think sharing my story is one of the things that I really enjoy, because yes, I recognize the effort that I have tried to put on so that I can reach here, but also other people that have been, have come throughout to support me, including Nadia and the team, getting the work permit, and also growing every time I get the opportunity. Now, talking about my story and the application of work permits in Kenya, that's like, for me, before getting some support from Nadia and other people that decided like fully to support me throughout the journey of that application, I've tried several times, because after getting the opportunity to continue with my education with GEM SNHU through GEM program, I think that's one thing that I was really looking at ways to sustain myself. And as you know, some people can have an idea of living in the camp. There are little things that you can get from the humanitarian aids and support that you get. At the same time, you have to rely on yourself to respond to your basic needs. And the only way to do that is through employment or entrepreneurship, or even support from relatives and friends. But for me, I use education like one tool, major tool that I can use to unlock different doors, and including work opportunities. And in as much as I could get opportunities, like open a position, and I felt like I was really qualified to also apply for that opportunity, it has never been easier, because every time I could just been told that you have to present your work permit so that you can be granted that opportunity. And that's why I started now realizing that even getting a work permit after getting all the qualification that you need, getting a work permit or get employed in a certain company, it's not an easy process, especially for refugees in Kenya. And I remember, going and doing my own research on how to get a work permit, consulting different people. And one of, few challenges that I've noticed back then was, one is lack of proper information on how to get, how that process looks like, and how someone who wants to get a work permit has to start, where the person has to start from throughout the step, so that it can be successful, out of that process. And also, the other thing was, what are the requirements? Coming to the requirements, at some point, I even remember, trying several times, going to, because it's an online process, an online application that you have to start, and also submit all the papers as you're going, or as they need them. But at some point, I realized that even papers are not even recognized by some department in the local government who are supposed to issue the work permit itself. So that lack of documentation, it's not really, people don't have documentation, but the documentation that are issued to refugees are not recognized widely, even in Kenya itself. So that has been one of the key challenges that people, like someone like me, and as well as refugees, are facing in Kenya. And then, as you can also probably know, that once you are competing with other people for a certain position, even the employer look for ways to eliminate people. Of course, you might be qualified, but there are a few things that, if you're not ready, even, for example, starting the job immediately, or for example, presenting all the papers that are required immediately, they can even kick you out of that position, not because you're not qualified, but because there are people who are really very, let me say, sharp to even submit their papers as they required. So that's one thing, because the process of getting a work permit in Kenya, it's a long process. And from the last application that I did, and together with other people who supported me, it's something that we started, and I was able to get that work permit after 6 months. So you can imagine, if an employer is waiting for that documents to give you a job, it's practically impossible for that employer to wait for you over 6 months. Because every time there is an open position in a certain company, that means there is a gap that they want to fill, and they can't wait for you for over 6 months, or even a month. It's really somehow practically difficult even to see that. So it's really like a little bit challenging. And also the other thing is like getting an employer who can hold your hand and say, I'll support you through this, because the process of getting a work permit in Kenya, it's more of like engaging the candidates, the refugee who is seeking for that work permit, as well as the company who is providing that kind of position to that refugee. So in most cases, you'll find that there are papers, especially internal papers, like some point they ask for valid tax compliance of the company. And it's you can understand how sensitive those kind of, documents can be for the company to expose out, especially to expose to the government, because they have to see how you file your taxes. Are you really in order? And some of the companies are not really in a position to expose themselves to that level. So they prefer not engaging with refugee candidates than exposing themselves or bringing more issues in their companies. So that's like how, like if I have to give an overview of how it looks like, that's how, acquiring for a work permit in Kenya looks like. And practically from my own, let me say from my own experience, as it sounds really very difficult, and it is really difficult and challenging if you don't have enough support, but also it's possible, because if I got one, that means even the rest of the refugees, young people who are seeking for that, can still get it. So there is hope for refugees, there is hope for young people, for graduates to get work permits and getting involved into work in and provide for themselves in the hosting countries, but they need a lot of support to be able to get to that level. So that's what I can share, and I'm happy to give more information as we are continuing with this session. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Joelle. Joelle really highlighted the need for patient and understanding employers. So shout out to the Amahoro Coalition, who went through this process with us and waited the 6 months and provided all of the paperwork. But as Joelle said, like, you have to find an employer that really wants to hire you in order to go through all of that. And before Joelle received her Class M work permit, the last one that we had heard of to be dispensed was in 1995. So she was really breaking new ground here. And I remember I was on a train when we got the email from a lawyer saying that she had gotten it, and we were yelling. And yeah, it was really an amazing day. And I hope that Joelle is the first of many Class M permits to succeed going forward. So thanks so much, Joelle, for sharing your story. And now I will switch over to Norhan.
Hey everyone. So I'm a Syrian refugee located here in Lebanon, pursuing my BA degree in healthcare management at SNU. So starting my professional career like 2 years ago, I was having almost only basic skills such as PowerPoint, Excel, Microsoft Word. I had to start somewhere, knowing that every job requires a certain number of years regarding experience. So I started applying to every single internship the global education movement was publishing. So I almost applied for all of them, no matter what the industry was. That's because as a refugee here, I'm not allowed to be working. As I applied for my residency in Lebanon, they had me sign a paper that says I'm not allowed to work under any circumstances. So I was hoping to work online, no matter what the industry was. The government here do not consider online working as an illegal matter till now. So I have done 7 internships ranging between quantitative and qualitative research, developing applications, marketing, as well as writing and publishing a white paper on the Journal of Audiovisual and Translation. Until the last internship was my luckiest, where the employer said that he would be glad if I would work with him. At that time, I had some first skill set in which he was planning to help me improve. So at that time, I remember I started struggling with communication. That was my first issue, like working digitally. I didn't want to look full, so I struggled on my own and didn't ask a lot of questions. And since we were like working online and not directly under the supervision of my employer, I was working double the time to figure things out, and my employer had no idea this was happening. But like, you know, due to his flexibility, saying words like, that's okay, you're still in the learning process, we've all started step by step. I'm not expecting you to do all of these tasks today, for example. So I felt comfortable and talking about, like, I started talking about weak points, communicating when I'm stuck. It turns out like communication was #1 issue while working online. But, you know, if employer knew how to deal with it, like, you know, like regular check-ins or stand-up meetings, or maybe like not waiting for the deadline to discuss how things were going with the employee. Maybe employers should communicate through the workday saying, hey, how things are going. Feel free to communicate if you feel stuck. For example, sometimes my employer has a lot of meeting and he says, I can't help you right now, but feel free to communicate it, and we can like start using our spare tasks. So we had some spare tasks. I remember like several times where there was like as well no electricity, and there was not a fixed time in which we know that there is or there is not electricity. So I communicated that as well with my employer, and he was super flexible to the extent that he offered to buy me power bank that might charges my laptop, or like buy me a new battery in which I can exchange, you know, the laptop battery every time it's out of power. But till now, he didn't find a way to buy me a power bank or battery. You know, he's from America and I'm like located here in Lebanon. So meanwhile, my employer is flexible with the work hours so that I do work whenever I can. There's no time frame like for working. So I spend my hours depending on when there's electricity, when there's internet, when there is like no distraction at home. Because I have a 3-year-old baby as well, who interrupts like every 5 minutes. And my employer is super flexible with that. In turn, like, you know, I'm seeing how much my employer is flexible, so I do appreciate it. I do my best like to be the employer of his dreams. So most of the time I try like my best not to take a sick day or super ill. So, you know, it's a matter of exchange flexibility working digitally. On top of that, working with him like digitally, I really became completely different person, and he definitely didn't spend the time of our meetings, just gave me like the setting and what we are expected to do. And he's like, hey, why don't you spend some time learning about, for example, inbound marketing, and give me the best practices, or make a checklist so that I don't have to waste time browsing. I just want to start right away after seeing your checklist, for example. This is how tasks work. So it's a win-win situation. I learned through self-browsing, and in turn save him a lot of time. So that's how my skills improved. While working online far away from my employer, he just tells me that there is something called, for example, pillar pages that increases SEO. Do your research, understand it, and you might come up with things that I don't know about. So make sure to take notes for best practices. And when you're done, and you still like, let's start applying, me and you. So he always makes sure I learn before we start applying. Yeah, so that's basically how my experience working online was like. The last issue I remember, I was struggling to get paid. I was getting paid through JAM, and then our partner was not able to do that for me, so he had to switch to Western Union, and then it turned out like they take a high percentage on the transaction, and then we switched to MoneyGram, in which like in America they deduct 2% of the transaction fee as a transaction fee, and on my side in Lebanon they deduct double the number. Yeah, and that's how my experience was.
Thanks so much, Nurhan. And as Nurhan mentioned, she brought up a couple of the issues that we see a lot in digital employment, and one of the main ones being payment modalities. And it's particularly challenging in Lebanon. And Nurhan started her position kind of toward the beginning of the latest economic crisis there. And as things got worse, her employer and herself had to pivot and use different channels to receive stipends. And I think between the two stories of Joel and Nurhan, you can just see that there's flexibility needed on both sides, and you have to have an employer that's willing to be flexible and kind of work together with the employee as changes arise. So thank you both so much for sharing your stories. If you can give some Zoom claps around the room if you'd like. I'm going to share my screen again as we go into our hackathon. So what I wanted to do for our hackathon is look at a case study of a very typical experience of a qualified refugee job seeker and an employer, and outline kind of the pros and cons to hiring that person, and then some of the main barriers that they might face in their employment journey. I will split you all into breakout rooms and have you hack at those problems and come up with a few solutions. So let me introduce our characters for the hackathon. We have Stephanie. She is an employer that is based in Los Angeles, and she is seeking a virtual administrative assistant. Her company has a new social impact hiring policy, so she's very interested in hiring refugees, but she and the company has never worked with international hires before, so don't have systems in HR to do that yet. And then we have Juma, who is a refugee job seeker. He's based in Dzaleka camp in Malawi. And in Malawi, refugees do not have the right to work locally, but there is a gray area in terms of online work. There really aren't regulations on who can or can't work online. He has a bachelor's degree from an online program, so is tech savvy. He also has access to a laptop and to internet. But for those of you that have been to the warm heart of Africa, you know that the internet is some of the worst in the whole world. So I say internet with a grain of salt. And he's also completed a local internship in an administrative role. So I know that you don't know all that much about Juma, but what I want to do is make a pros and cons list of why Stephanie should hire Juma versus hiring, say, a bachelor's degree graduate with the same qualifications who's based also in Los Angeles where she is. So I'm actually going to type out your responses as you give them to me. And let's start with the positives. So if you can throw out some pros for why Stephanie might want to hire Juma. Let me just reshare so that I can type on the screen. You can either put your answers in the chat box, or you can feel free to unmute. And I'm looking for the pros for why Stephanie should hire Juma. Lorraine, do you want to kick us off? I see you coming on and off mute.
Well, no, I want Resne to go first and I'll go second.
Okay.
Thanks, Lorraine. Like the pros, I could say because Stephanie is looking to hire on the refugee company or to start a new program for the refugees, she should hire Juma because he got the experience for it. Like he's experienced on that program, so that's a problem.
Yeah, definitely, right? So there's an interest in social impact hiring and a desire to hire refugees, and he's qualified. I'm seeing a lot of great answers in the chat box coming through, so I will respond to those, but please, anyone else, feel free to unmute.
Research shows that refugees stay longer in jobs, less turnover when you hire refugees than when you hire from the non-refugee population, according to research.
Definitely. Evan has a great one in the chat box. He's actually saying it's an advantage to have someone in a different time zone, which is interesting because usually people talk about that as a con, but I am in total agreement with you, Evan, that having someone awake at all hours across your team really is an advantage. Yeah, Christina also has in the chat box that Juma probably has experience facing challenges and creative problem solving from his experience as a refugee. I'll also add to that list resilience, working with employers who have hired refugees. I think this is a very common response, is that they are more resilient in the workplace than other folks. Yeah, Christian, you brought up an obvious and important one, lower cost. So in Malawi, for example, I should have Googled the exact figure, but the average pay is about $1 a day. And someone with a bachelor's degree, I think, is earning about $3 per hour on the high side. So if you're an LA-based company where most of your employees are earning minimum wage at least, that's $15. So if you're willing to pay at least minimum wage, you can hire someone with extreme qualifications and probably triple or quadruple what they would be making locally. Great. The list goes on and on. Is there anyone else that wants to unmute and share theirs? I'm sorry if I've missed it in the chat box. All right. Okay, so now let's be realistic. Juma sounds lovely. He sounds very qualified, but there are some cons. So what are some cons to hiring Juma versus a similarly qualified candidate in LA? Razeen, go ahead.
Yeah, the con is gonna be obvious, like it's a connection here, and you can say the availability.
Yeah, availability. So general life challenges, things that are interfering, they're not in the office. Yeah, Joel, I like that you put in time zone, because in as much as it is a pro, it can also be a con. They have to sleep sometime. Juma will be offline at a certain point. Yeah, Evan, you all have a great one. Cultural differences, a pro and a con. Do you want to unmute and talk a little bit more about that one?
Sure. About the cultural differences, it can be, especially with remote communication, we see this with I teach programming for students from all over too, and especially with the written communication, people just don't always get what they're trying to say, and that can lead on the one end to actual clashes, but also just to less productive conversations when you don't all have the same references or the same points of reference, same vocabulary, same experiences. So that's great. On the pro side, we see that like different types of experience, but it can also make the day-to-day operations a little rougher sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a pro and a con. Oh, yeah, Diasa, you have a great one, lack of a high performing laptop. Actually, I need to pause you guys because you are getting into the hackathon bit of this, because you're bringing up a lot of the challenges that I'm about to present in our scenario. But yeah, the list goes on and on for both the pros and the cons, right? And if you're an employer, you need to figure out which outweighs the other. And also if the cons list is worth, or sorry, if the pros list is stronger than the cons. And obviously I'm biased, I work in this field, but I think absolutely it does, right? So what I want to present now is a little journey of Juma. And I'm going to highlight 5 issues that he runs into in his employment journey. And then I will break you out into into breakout rooms. We have 35 people, so I think I'll probably do 4 or 5 rooms so that you're with 3 or 4 other people. And I want you in your groups to come up with a solution. And I challenge you to think outside of the box in those groups, but also like be realistic. This is the real world that we're living in. And then when we come back after about 10 minutes or so, I'm going to go through problem by problem and hear the group's different solutions. So the first challenge that Juma runs into is in his application and onboarding process. And again, this is a fantastic group. So you've brought up a lot of these issues in our brainstorm about the pros and cons. But the first issue that he faces is that in the hiring process, Juma is asked to show proof of a right to work, which he obviously does not have because he is not allowed to work locally in Malawi. That's challenge number 1. Challenge number 2 is that now he's been offered the job and they send him the general paperwork that the Los Angeles company has, and it includes a W-2 form. And on that W-2 form, it asks for his tax ID. In Malawi, refugees do not have tax IDs because, again, they are not allowed to work locally. Challenge number 2. Challenge number 3 is the third in the application and onboarding phase, but Stephanie wants to send Juma a company laptop, but Malawi will impose taxes that are worth twice the amount of the device. He also can't buy that kind of laptop specifically in Malawi. That's challenge number 3. Number 4 is that Dzaleka camp, and we actually have a bunch of participants who live in Dzaleka camp, so I know you guys can attest to the reality of this scenario. Dzaleka camp has a blackout for 48 hours, and the strict COVID restrictions prevent Juma from traveling outside of the camp or into the city to charge his laptop, and he is unable to communicate that to Stephanie. And then the 5th challenge that I want you to tackle is that Juma is taking notes and recording an important investor call, and his internet goes out and he loses the recording and is unable to reconnect. So 5 very real scenarios. Do we have any questions? And actually, Evan, I see your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Are we looking for preemptive solutions or dealing with a problem after it happened?
That is a great question. I leave it to you. I'm happy to hear both. So either preemptive or these issues have already arisen. I leave it to you. Any other questions before I move you into breakout rooms? All right. And I will also share my deck so that everyone has access to those 5 issues. All right, the deck is in the chat box, and that list of the 5 challenges is in slide number 7, and it's 10:40 right now, and I'm only going to give you 10 minutes. I know that we could talk about these challenges for hours and hours, but I'm going to give you 10 quick minutes and then pull everyone back to do a share out. All right, and I'm very bad at math, but I'm going to try to crunch my numbers so that you're in smallish groups. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm going to have 5 groups and you're going to be assigned automatically. So who knows who will be in your group, and I will see you back here in 10 minutes.
Nadia, I'm happy to stay here and handle the breakouts, like if anyone jumps off and on, and like if you want to go like through the breakouts, that's completely okay. I'm hosting the session, so.
Okay, awesome. Also, is there a way to set a time? I know that there is a way to set a timer, but I never know how to do it.
Yeah, I know. I think you had to set it
Oh, when I started.
before you opened it, but no worries. We can broadcast a message, you know, like when it's 5 minutes, you know, like letting them know.
Okay.
So from now on, like 9 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, Prince, I'm gonna put you in a breakout room. Okay, perfect. So yeah, we'll come back at like 52, I think.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna go wander around. Thanks, Camilla. Hey, welcome back, everyone. I feel very guilty to have closed those rooms because there were such good conversations going on in each of them when I popped in. There also seemed to be a lot of techies on the call because there were a lot of tech solutions to these problems that I had never thought of. Also, we're totally going to run out of time today. So before I forget, I wanted to drop in our LinkedIns. So Nurhan, Joel, and myself, please connect with us because I have a feeling we're not going to get a chance to talk through everyone's ideas, but would love to connect separately and do that when we have more time. In the original version where I felt like we would have all the minutes in the world, I was going to get each group to present, but instead I am just going to open it up, say, let's talk about challenge number 1, and then anyone can throw out their group's innovative idea. I'm going to share the screen and take notes so that also folks can have these notes after the session. But yeah, let's start with problem number 1. So in the hiring process, Juma is asked to show proof of right to work. What did people come up with as a solution? Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, I think, I would love to add some ideas from our group. Concerning the first question, we looked at both sides would have to do certain tasks. Thus, in the case of Juma, he might have to identify, do a bit of research on the policies and regulations that he has. And on the company that's trying to hire him, maybe they could sort of hire him as a permanent employee. They could work act as a freelancer or even a contractor. So as that he's not permanently within that company, but he's still doing a bit of freelancing for that company. So these are some of the solutions we came up for the first question. All right, thank you.
I love it. Thanks so much, Wayne. And if you also agree or your group had the same one, give me a +1 in the chat box. Any other ideas for problem number 1? Yeah, that was the solution that we mostly came up with in my line of work. There are a bunch of really cool companies out there these days that are third-party hiring companies like Oyster, like Deal, and they will make it a little bit easier to hire folks internationally as contractors. I know that there are more responses, but I have to move on. So challenge number 2, Juma needs a tax ID to fill out his W-2. Solutions, give them to me.
If he's a contractor, he doesn't need that because this is for an American employee and he's not American and the company doesn't have an office in Malawi, so he can't be classed as an American employee. So that's moot.
Yep, great. And it's hard though, because employers that have, so yeah, Lauren, you figured out the trick in this, right? So it's that he doesn't need a W-2, but employers often don't know that because like Stephanie, they've never hired internationally before. So he doesn't need a W-2, he needs a W-9. And challenge number 3, Stephanie wants to send Juma a company laptop, but Malawi will impose taxes worth twice the amount of the device. What are our solutions?
Yeah, I guess I could go ahead for our team. The solution that our team came up is that, to say it literally, the company just could bite the bullet and just send him the laptop so that he can start his work because of the location he is in. With the payments that he have, it will be okay. But also the refugee or Juma could also utilize his local connections. What he could do is if he has relatives living in the US, they can maybe just bring in the stuff, the laptop or the resources without having to pay for taxes or anything like that. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I love it. Bite the bullet, just pay the money. It's worth it. Lorraine, I see you have a great one in the chat box. Have the next person traveling bring it. Yeah, a friend of a friend. That's the common way. Any other ideas? Yeah, sending it in advance. Yep, Dimiani, a great idea. Sending it in advance as soon as you know that the person is going to be onboarded. Okay, challenge number 4. Zuleika has a blackout for 2 days. He can't tell Stephanie. What do we do?
Excuse me. I think the in advance was an advance, like the money ahead of time.
Oh,
So that he could order it himself, however.
yeah, I love it. I love both in advance and an advance. Both of them work. Great. Okay, I see it's a direct message to me, but purchase a solar panel for Juma so that he doesn't have to depend on grid electricity. Any other solutions to the blackout problem?
Also, and when you create and assign tasks, just make sure that maybe everything Juma has isn't on a tight deadline.
Yeah.
I think in addition, a power bank would be useful.
Yeah.
Or a replacement battery, just like, yeah.
Yeah. I hope that everyone on this call is hiring refugees, because it sounds like you would all be very flexible, understanding employers to all of these issues. All right, we have 60 seconds. Last challenge. Juma is taking notes and his internet goes out and he cannot get back on with the investor. What do we do?
Kind of linked to the problem in number 4. And I agree with Lana's comment in the chat about cultivating compassion and flexible workflows, is also given the fact that the employer doesn't know much about these challenges. And then Juma is also learning a new work culture, would be for them to set up, some kind of an orientation where he actually orients them to what are the challenges that I may face. And then here's what I plan to do if situation number 5 happens. And so thinking about, anticipating those challenges if and when they happen, and discussing together what Stephanie would prefer him to do and like what he can do, and just being really proactive about that.
Entirely. I entirely agree with you. I also see some great responses in the chat box about using live cloud backups and auto transcription software so that it doesn't get lost. And also, yeah, Lorraine, making sure that he's not on a call with investors alone. I wish that I had all day with this group. I've sat in on a lot of panels and workshops, and I have to say, Lana, this is the best group that I've seen. So thank you all so much for participating. I'll give a 60-second wrap up, which is from my experience, I feel like these are the key things that need to happen to make digital employment more accessible. So 1, we need to be advocating with host community governments to increase refugee work rights and permits, either to work locally or to work online. Number 2 is that we need to make sure that the refugee job seekers are prepared with digital professional skills, which includes so much of what you were talking about using software to preempt any issues, making sure that they have the tech to back up their electricity systems. And then finally is to train employers on what it is like. I think people are very keen on this idea of impact hiring, but maybe they don't know exactly what it all entails and the flexibility that it requires. So training employers on international hiring policies and what it's like to integrate someone with a refugee status in your workplace and make them feel accommodated and heard and like their barriers are overcomable. So thank you all so much, and please do connect on LinkedIn. And finally, just an extra thank you to Joel and to Norhan for sharing their stories today. And back to you, Lana.
Yeah, I want to take over because this is my thing, remote work. Thank you. And I'm going to take the privilege to say a couple more things. When you work with a company that's already remote, they know how to deal with people who are remote. For a company like Stephanie's, who's never hired someone in a different country, who is only located in one physical place, even hiring someone who's not a refugee in London will be difficult. So I think, you know, when we're thinking about this space, think about companies that know what they're doing, because there's one less obstacle. Companies which are already remote are much easier employers because they already do this. So thank you, Nadia. We have a lot more sessions around this space: digital skills, digital work, the right to work. We have sessions on all of these things. Please have a look at the schedule, sign up. And one last thing, we talk about technical skills, soft skills, perhaps more important. So remember, whilst it's good to know how to code, know how to use the laptop, if you don't have these communication skills, it's very, very difficult. So so this is one thing that I want to leave you with. See you again. We have a session in a couple of hours with some refugee storytellers here telling their pathway from education to employment. We have the Discord link, so we can perhaps continue this discussion in the Discord channel. Please share your ideas, and thank you, everyone. We're really happy to have you here, happy to host you here. Nadia, big thank you.